and welcome to a new show here at thatchannel.com. It is the Digital Citizen Show. I'm Hugh Reilly, and I'm fortunate to be here today with a couple of really great guys, smart guys, and we're going to be talking about some stuff that is brand new. I've got Norman Evans here from Digital Citizen and from the Creative Marketing Network, and I've got Jon Chevreau here from the Financial Independence Hub. And Norman, I know you like to quote Bob Dylan sometimes, and what's that quote? Let's start the show off with that quote about what we don't know.
Something happened and you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones?
Exactly, and we don't know what's happening.
And we don't know, but
that's because we're blockheads.
well, that's also true.
And that's what this is all about.
Exactly.
Getting the world excited about becoming a blockhead, which of course is a reference to the blockchain revolution, which is this book by Don Tapscott.
Indeed.
Which was just released about a week ago. It's now in the middle of a 10-city tour. And it's a book that I think people should pay attention to.
I know you've been reading it because you showed me your copy and it had lots of underline in it. And the blockchain thing is really important. And in fact, Norman, you were saying that this is reminding you, because I know you've been involved in working with Microsoft and with some other kind of game-changing technologies that have come along over the years. Do you want to just start with what this is an echo of?
In 1984, I was a nascent marketing sales guy in the world of Unix, and nobody knew what Unix was. And I asked a question being, what is Unix and how is it going to impact your business and so on? So with Howard Reisman, who was transitioning his company from a paradigm of mainframe mini into a super micro world, and these technologies were influencing everything that was happening. So what the objective at that time was to invite $100 million of prospects into the one room and in government, business, and in the different vertical markets. And I posed the question, what is the impact of Unix going to have on your strategic decisions moving forward? And one of our clients at the time was a young writer, researcher called Don Tapscott. And so we invited Don to talk, focus on Unix event that in 1984, May the 17th, 1984. And actually, Jon Chevreau, the world perhaps doesn't realize, is actually coming from a technology background into the financial background, into the technology business. And when he was in with Globe and Mail, being the PR guy I was, I called up the media and I called up John. I said, we're having this focus on Unix event. And he said, where is it? And I said, Markham. And he said, I don't go to Markham. So it was, and that was the first time we actually met. And then a couple of years later, we started working together, and we wrote a book together, planned to work the plan. And this is monumental because last week, and then I'll cut off shortly, we had the opportunity to videotape Don Tapscott, his 16th book since his book Office Automation back then.
A user-driven method.
A user-driven method, and subsequently the paradigm shift and so on. But last week we had the opportunity to interview him again and see him, and he was very nicely on the video says, Norman Evans, Unix is going to be big, and I think that's.
And I think what's going on now is, what's interesting about that thing last week was his co-author, who's his son, Alex Tapscott. And he is from the financial world. So Don is from IT, information technology. I was going to say that if going back in history, I actually interviewed Don. I'd like to believe I was the first journalist because I was a little computer publication, Computing Canada, right out of journalism school, 1979. And I wrote some little thing, a speech that Don Tapscott had given when he was at Bell Northern Research, long before Trigon, Emerald City, and before he became the Don Tapscott we all know and love and respect today. Now, of course, he's one of the four most influential people in IT, I believe. And he spun this thing about the model office of the future. It was 1984. I had a good job at the Globe and Mail, which is where Norman failed to get me to go to Markham. And but Don, his was downtown, so it was a little more alluring. They were going to have this office of the future, model office of the future, set in on Richmond Street, and I was just fascinated by this. So I ended up joining his firm, and it was called Emerald City. It was a Unix office automation sort of software venture. Anyway, he's written these books. I can't say I read every one of them, but I think the blockchain revolution is going to be right up there with whatever his other big books, Wikinomics,
Indeed.
and digital something or other.
Because he's well known actually worldwide as one of the preeminent thinkers about a kind of high level, big picture of how technology is going to influence the way we do
I believe
things.
if you Google him, he's like one of the top 4 most influential people in IT or strategic planning, whatever. And I'm sure he's got a big, long Wikipedia entry that we could go find out for sure.
And we're talking about blockchain today, but we're also talking about fintech, because
Indeed.
it seems to me that a lot of people in Toronto and beyond, everywhere really are talking about fintech. And John, you're involved in the fintech, and maybe you can start by kind of defining fintech for us, because I think there's a lot of people out there that still don't really know.
It's a new buzzword that sort of just hit, as far as I know, about a year ago. I mean, on the Financial Independence Hub, for example, we have fintech advertisers. And there are 2, for example. One was Borrowell, they're not there currently, which is online lending. Which is aimed at basically millennials don't want to walk into bricks and mortar bank branches to get a loan. They want it online, just want to click, do it on your iPhone or any other device, Android device. So that's the one space. And there's other companies like GroupLend, Borrowell, et cetera. The other one is the robo-advisors. And we again on the hub we have various robo-advisors who show up there. Nest Wealth currently, but you'll see other ads from other people. And so robo-advisors is online automated advice, supposedly bypassing human advisors, though in Canada, as opposed to the States, the robo-advisors do have a component of human advice. So those are 2 examples of fintech, online lending and robo-advice, or online investing. But what I established when I interviewed Don Tapscott at the book launch, and his son, Alex, again, who's from the financial world, was an investment banker, which is why it's a fascinating book, because they really talk about the impact that's going to happen on the financial services industry. But I asked them, is fintech synonymous with blockchain? Because the more you get into blockchain, and I wouldn't attempt to really explain it properly, it's all based on trust essentially and decentralization. But what Alex said was, no, fintech and blockchain are not quite synonymous. To him, real fintech is based on blockchain. Everything else would be sort of like a marketing kind of buzzword. It's a buzzword and everybody's claiming to do fintech, but to do real fintech, it's got to be real blockchain. Which begs the question, what is blockchain? Before we even get into what it is, I think it's more important. This book, it's actually astonishing how much, if you believe it all, he's talking about it being as big or bigger, as I wrote up in the Post a week ago, than the internet itself. It's like, is it 2nd generation, 3rd generation? But he's talking about the 2 billion people on the planet who are unbanked. And they don't need to they can bypass an entire infrastructure. It's like countries that no longer don't have a telecom system or landlines. They go directly to smartphones and wireless or whatever technology they're using. In the same way, blockchain, as I understand it, will allow the unbanked to bypass, even if they don't have banks. The whole point is there's micropayments and micro-lending and the ability to kind of slice payments and transactions. Because the financial industry are huge intermediaries. So when you do, and it takes like, 3 or 4 days to transfer money from here to, let's say, Cuba would be a good example, where they go to Miami, they want to send their money back to the family because that's their only means of support. So they got to send money electronically. It takes 3 or 4 days. Blockchain allows basically in 10 minutes, as I understand it. But there's a lot of implications for democracy, it's just staggering when you see, if you believe it. And I'm not sure about that. They referenced The Economist magazine, newspaper out of Britain, the weekly. I think it was late on October. They had this cover story. Now, as Tapscott said, you can rely on The Economist for spotting big mega trends. And they did nail this one. And what did they go with for their big cover line? The trust machine. So to me, blockchain is about trusting people, because you can't, right up till now, without it, you have a bank, and they're the middleman. And if I don't know you from Adam, I want to buy your used car, I have to trust somebody that you're a stand-up guy. as I understand it, and that's why it started with Bitcoin. We almost have to go back to what is Bitcoin before you get into what blockchain is. But what it really is disintermediating, getting rid of the intermediary, which has been the banks historically, decentralizing, so this spread out all these computers, and it's a way that you and I can have a transaction, whether it's on the currency side through Bitcoin or other ways, whether it's voting and democracy and all the rest of it. So that, but we don't have, it's not reliant on a central system. And I can trust you and you can me, and it's all verified. And because of the blockchain and the way it's all encoded and the data mining, et cetera, you can't go back on a transaction. It's there for all time. You can't welch on your promises. And then it escalates from there. You have reputation. It's like a credit rating. We all have reputation ratings,
right.
et cetera. So to me, it's what you got to look at is through this prism of trust.
And now there's a couple issues there. One thing is, one of the reasons people aren't trusting the banks these days is because the governments are coming in and they're very interested in people's personal data. So people are feeling their privacy is being taken away with government. They're trying to stop terrorists getting funded and that sort of thing. So they want to know more and more about who's spending, using money, because they want to stop that sort of thing. Plus, we've seen the legislation, the bail-in legislation that we have now in Canada, that they did in Cyprus. So people are going, even if I trust the bank, I don't know if I can trust the banking system to not go into my account and take my money.
Indeed.
And sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that the irony is that the financial crisis of 2008, which has led to a lot of people distrusting the financial system, and in particular Wall Street, and we got Occupy Wall Street, all that stuff. The irony is that was the year that Bitcoin sort of serendipitously came out of nowhere. This book talks about the president, a young guy, Russian-Canadian, he's age 20, who started a company called Ethereum. I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah.
I have the T-shirt.
He was at the panel. We have him on our video.
Yeah. So, that's an amazing story. So, I mean, right now we're talking about innovation, and Don was talking about Toronto as a hub, a fintech hub, and a blockchain hub. But there's some Canadian companies that are going to be world beating here. I would love, as an investor, Financial Independence Hub, to find out which of these. I think this is a private company and is micro-funded, et cetera. But at some point, somebody should start up an ETF or a mutual fund investing in blockchain.
Exactly.
I'm in.
I'm in.
One of the things is that this is really challenging to a lot of the established institutions, of course, like banking. I've had days where I've said to myself, I just don't want to deal with banks at all. And I thought... And
millennials are like that.
And now, well, even when we hear talk of that we're going to do away with cash, that everything is going to be, direct deposit, that's, to me, that's like really taking away some freedom to not have anybody peering over our shoulders when we're going about our business. But it seems to me that one of the promises of Bitcoin, of blockchain, is that we really actually can completely disconnect ourselves from the banking system now. You can go completely blockchain. The governments are struggling with how to tax it, how to regulate it, and in Canada now, I believe they're looking at Bitcoin as an asset, so that if you have a capital gain, if your Bitcoin value goes up, they're going to look at that as a capital gain, and they're going to tax it that way. But
we have to make it simpler. We have to bring it into a paradigm of what you need is what you get, which is what Uber does. But Uber is not a blockchain company because it's another...
That's interesting, the book, because it talks about basically a blockchain version of Uber. And it talks about all the problems Uber has. Uber is not particularly fintechy. It's not based on blockchain. But so the book talks about Suber, sort of a super blockchain-based Uber. And it goes the same exercise with Airbnb.
Indeed.
So a blockhead, I keep on saying blockhead, a blockchain version of Airbnb. Again, the Airbnb has its problems. Right now, the Airbnb is still profiting by being the center person, taking their 15% or whatever their cut is between me trying to rent out my extra space to you, a client. They're the big middleman. With a blockchain version of it, you could cut out the middleman and everybody could make a little bit more money. And the other thing, similarly speaking, is the revolution for artists, for musicians. And you're a musician. You have a group called Spec, which we can talk about, but also writers, journalists,
all of that ownership,
and video, and artists too. There are so many companies and little startups that are mentioned in this book about, basically they're going to revolutionize the art world. Cut out the middleman. Like, look at all the art fraud that's out there right now. There's people passing off Rembrandts for $15 million. Some guy just whipped it up 2 days ago in their basement. And again, it comes back to trust and how do you get out beyond
and
the
ownership.
fraud and ownership and intellectual property rights,
clear title,
musicians who are, how do they get paid properly? I mean, in the old days, the record companies made all the big money, and then there was the whole problem with distribution and publicity and marketing. And there's a lot of examples of artists who are sort of like bypassing the big guys. So again, the technology is for something that is almost incomprehensible. What is a blockchain?
But you can guarantee that if we, the public, if the rest of the world has suddenly woke up, blockchain, it's been going on for many cycles and the people, the big banks and the people that are very invested in it, they're working on their blockchain strategy with intensity. When we went to the Microsoft World Partners meeting in 2012, they announced we are all in the cloud. Nobody knew what the cloud was 20 minutes ago. Right? Now everybody's got the cloud. Nobody knew what a touch screen was until they saw it. That's what paradigms are. Yeah. As soon as you see them, it was obvious. No, I could have thought of that. But that's not the way it works.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was just, from what you guys are saying, I'm just wondering if the fundamental message because here we are, we're talking about blockchain, and we want to think about what the implications are for businesses of all kinds.
Well, I was about to interject on that same note, which was, Alex told me, I asked Don about any of the banks he's dealing with. He said, well, I can tell you we're working with the Royal Bank. There's a RBC's Mackay, I think, has a big testimonial right on the front page here, or in the early pages. But when I clarified with Alex, as well, we're talking to all the banks, and of course, I think Procter & Gamble's in on this. Every major corporation, and what Alex said, the reason the financial service industry is particularly worried or enthused by this is either they're worried about they're going to miss the boat, or they just want to use the technology to cut costs because it's a low growth area and increase profitability and hence their stock prices. But really, he said the third thing was they need to, in the case of Canadian banks, move beyond the Canadian borders. They need to have some positive reasons, not just because our growth's down or we're worried about falling behind. There's a lot of positive things they need to do. So, and then that's just the financial services sector. But in fact, to your question, just about any business, I'd say if you're a senior executive, you at least should find out what is this stuff. It's not an easy concept to explain. I can't even explain Bitcoin.
I'm wondering though, because I was wondering if maybe the fundamental message of the blockchain is that it is a way to eliminate the middleman.
Yeah, while keeping trust, while establishing trust.
Exactly, and doing that anonymously. But the big thing is there's so many businesses that their essential business is that they are the middleman, right? So it seems to me,
particularly financial services.
I went last night to University of Toronto and to the IBM blockchain meeting. There must have been 60 or 80 people in this meeting, in a beautiful evening when the big game's on TV, and they're watching code. They're talking about code. They're talking about the invisible. They're talking about zeros and ones. We had a show in October where we spoke about the great undiscovered and unpublished. All of these diaries you wrote and all of these things that you did and all these poems you did and all of these things you did in your life that you suffered writer's block because you got rejected by some publisher. Now you can do it, and that's why this is so exciting to be here, because we're right in the center of for the financial district of Toronto, where Hugh Reilly has created
600 Bay Street.
600 Bay Street, and the epicenter of fintech. We've already reached out, as Hugh said, to the Mars community, but our idea is to build a conversation, a place where all of these startup companies can articulate their 1 minute, 5 minute, and 17-minute TED talk so that they can build a strategy around their business, and hopefully we will be able to give a framework, because that's all we have is a framework of planning that will help them before you go off and build your next ad campaign, and before you do anything else, stop and start planning the strategy.
You know, I'm thinking the viewer, so far, they may be a little frustrated with us because I don't think we've really explained blockchain. Or what do you mean? What is the block? What is a chain of blocks? Or for that matter, Bitcoin. I would find it a daunting task to actually try to explain that, but can either of you?
I think I can. So the
take a stab at it?
blockchain is the
A chain of blocks.
the ongoing software thingy that manages Bitcoin. Okay, so Bitcoin is the first blockchain.
And it was in a currency.
But it's an
It was a
envelope.
currency, yeah. It's a good thing. So so Satoshi Nakamoto, who wrote the white paper and who launched Bitcoin, came up with this. It's a software. But essentially, what it is, you've heard of the term mining Bitcoin. Well, what that is that you're taking some computer resources and you're dedicating them as part of the overall global network of hardware and software that crunches the numbers and manages Bitcoin, manages the blockchain.
There's a fascinating documentary called The Secret Life of Modern Algorithms or something. It's on Netflix, but it's absolutely fascinating. That algorithms are the very reason that you build it once, sell it many times, and why you can actually get out of bed and walk in the morning. Because what it does is it trains the function of the actions that you do, and it does a work back. So blockchain is part of that algorithm that will attach to the asset, but it protects, it's a signature on the asset that only the transaction, when I pass it to you and you pass it to John, it can't be broken. The original contract cannot be broken. It's a complete analog within a digital. It's unbreakable. It can't be forged because of all of the transactions that are going on in the chain of blocks.
There's a concept we need to get clear, and I just had to go back to the book. It's this worldwide ledger.
Yeah,
that's right.
Okay.
And I think we need to get. Let me take the recourse of actually reading the passage, because it's
great idea.
Big banks and some governments are implementing blockchain as distributed ledgers. Remember, it's like a revolution, like double entry bookkeeping was a revolution.
Indeed.
So here again, we're back to the accounting model. So distributed ledgers, distributed on by computers around the world, to revolutionize the way information is stored and transactions, financial transactions, occur. The goals are laudable: speed, lower cost, security, fewer errors, and the elimination of central points of attack and failure. And these models don't necessarily involve a cryptocurrency for payments. Think of all the big businesses where they basically have quarterly reports, and we all know as business people what a nightmare accounting can be, and you got to get your quarterly numbers and all the rest of it. But the blockchain, according to the book, talks about basically how you can have real time, every 10 minutes you could have your income statement or your balance sheet is just updated more or less continuously in real time. And you can imagine, and then in the same way that, let's say, going back to the artist example, where you've got your own, you've put out your own CD music. In the old days it would be CD, now it's on the cloud. But you can now be paid. You don't have to wait for the record company to say, after 6 months we've totaled up your numbers, and unfortunately there's no profit, so we couldn't give you anything. Right. You get these tiny little micro payments, maybe because you some kid at university downloaded something on a bitstream or something that played your song that you created. You, the royalty person, you get the royalty instantly or within 10 seconds as you go, and the accounting's all kept up. It's all about integrity, speed, accuracy, fairness to the author, valuing intellectual property, IP. I mean, are we starting to get where we're going here?
I'm saying that empowerment right now is don't wait, do it, own it now, and own yourself, and learn how these things, and pay attention to what you're doing today and how it's going to affect the future. This is a big thing. There's how many? There's 1,500 startups in Mars. There's 40 in DMZ. There's all of these all of these new tools are being developed by the millennium and younger, and it's our responsibility to sort of say, stay on track with the strategy.
Well, here we are, and we're talking about, if this is a big revolution, like the title of the book obviously suggests, then it is probably something that everybody, every business, every individual, every entrepreneur, every artist, as you say, Jon, should be really paying attention to. And maybe because I'm trying to think, like, what's the opportunity? What's the takeaway, even from our discussion here today? One of them, I think, is to read the book.
Indeed.
Yeah.
At least find out what this is, and then ask yourself, where's the opportunity for me?
The subtitle is, it says how the technology behind Bitcoin is changing money, business, and the world. Quite a big claim, really. But after reading it, it's like, well, maybe that's true. But it's about prosperity, though.
So you're talking about prosperity. Now, what do you mean by that? Because there's a lot of people concerned about their own personal prosperity.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what was Occupy Wall Street about? What is the Trudeau administration? A lot of the Bernie Sanders. We got a lot of sort of left wing. The Leapers and all that. The NDP, and it's all about redistribution of wealth.
Right.
Now, Don actually said this. I can't remember if I interviewed him on it or he just said it as part of his pitch last week. That it's what if it's not about redistributing wealth, which is essentially getting the state to take money from you and give it to him because he needs it, and you got way too much, Hugh. You don't need all that money. 54% top marginal tax rate, kind of high. Laffer curve starts to kick in at 50%, where people start to avoid taxes. But so Don was talking about, never mind redistributing wealth. Let's go back to like creating wealth, giving away for, again, the artists and musicians, the people who are sending money from Miami to Cuba to keep the family going, with micropayments and sort of entrepreneurial ventures and crowdsourcing and ways that eliminate the middlemen so you can have micropayments, and it's creating prosperity.
Because when you think about it, the middleman really is kind of a drag on the overall system.
And government's the ultimate middleman in this
government
country.
And banks, I have to put banks in this category of, like, what are they actually creating, right?
The difference between the deposits and the mortgages rates.
Well, all of these.
But they're not building anything.
But all of these.
They're just taking a spread.
Yeah.
Between I put money in the bank of Hugh, and he goes and has to buy a house, also the bank of Hugh, but you're charging him 2% more than you're giving me as a depositor. That's what banking is, right? So yes, they're the ultimate middlemen, and if you could cut them out, there's a little more for him and a little more for you.
You can build more houses and have more housing for people.
So we're really saying we want the have-nots to be haves. And another term for that, of course, I have a bias, we want to make them financially independent, or Findependence, right?
Indeed.
So that's, we don't want people to be financially dependent on government, or financially dependent on a big corporation or a bank or anybody. We all want to be financially independent. We all want to be prosperous. We all want to have wealth and wealth-creating jobs and be employers and help the next generation up. Personally, I think we're going to live a long time. We can talk another episode about the boomers and the whole thing about victory lap retirement, but it is about prosperity.
I think that's great. We got your website up there.
There it is,
Jon, and I know that is at least part of your mission, is to make everybody financially independent. And it seems to me that, and no wonder you're reading the book, even though I know you know Don Tapscott, but that this is a whole new technology, a whole new thing that could really make financial independence possible for the first time ever, and really, not that we have to redistribute the wealth, but maybe just redefine
Create the
currency.
wealth. Create the wealth. You don't have to redistribute it.
This is what Jon is doing with this mission to get everybody financially independent. And Norman, you've got digitalcitizen.com, and this is a new concept of what, how we approach citizenship and how we work together as human beings.
If I may, to introduce everybody to the band, because we couldn't do this without it, and everybody in this set here, and I'm sure there's going to be shots of it, everyone in this set is part of our own little Magnificent Seven group, because as the premise of the Magnificent Seven said, the world is being attacked. The subjects in the world think they need guns to solve the problem. They quickly find out they don't need guns, they need a strategy, and they need the right people. And I think that we're with the right people.